Let's talk about West Ham because it's been a rollercoaster of a season for you. I mean, what would be your mark out of 10 in terms of this season for West Ham? Because in the league, you've lost 20 games this season, yet in this competition, you've been fantastic. Obviously, you got yourself to the final. How do you summarise the West Ham season in total this year?
I think that's hard to do because, in one sense, the goal at the start of the season would be to stay up first and foremost and see what they can achieve in the league. Always hard to go back to back in terms of competing for Europe. But also then you've got the other part of the season, which is in Europe itself. Last year they were in the Europa League, made the semi-final, had this great run, which really brought the fan base together. This year it was about doing the same thing in the Conference League. Now, that's not easy to do, to juggle Europe and the Premier League, as we've seen with many different teams. But West Ham under Moyes have found a way to do that. This year, it seemed tougher, but I'm not sure whether that's necessarily due to the depth of the team or tiredness or that transition. It almost seems to be a little bit about the style of play. They went from this counter-attacking, hard-to-beat team, which would sort of soak up pressure and then hit you back with Antonio, with Benrahma and Bowen. But now they seem to be a lot more sort of taking the game forward, play higher up, but they've kind of struggled to maybe take that in, develop it, and be successful with it. So in a way, it's been a successful season because look at the result. You could have the first European title coming to West Ham since 1965 and Bobby Moore. But in another sense, a lot of the season hasn't been enjoyable for some of the fan base who have been watching games where, very little possession, again, sometimes having to go back to that. Games where, you're looking at other teams thinking last year they'd be really comfortable here. And this year you're near the bottom of the league. So it's been sort of a season of juxtaposition of sort of enjoying Europe, but also trying to find out what West Ham are in the Premier League.
So it does feel like they kind of reverted back. And Mikel Antonio recently was on a podcast and he was talking about the team and how they kind of tried to change that style of play, but then kind of reverted back to type to get themselves kind of over the line in terms of staying in the Premier League this year. Going into this final, who do you believe are the key players for West Ham?
I mean, there is no other place to look than Declan Rice, first and foremost. He's the captain. He is the heartbeat of the team. He's as confident a player as that team's going to get. And if he's on his game, you can see everyone else around him pick up and feel like, hey, we can win this. Lucas Paquetá, maybe the most talented player outside of Rice in that team. He needs to make sure he finds his feet in the final third. Against Alkmaar, he wasn't quite there at times in the first half of the London leg. But he's got the talent to beat any team on his day with Rice. And then I think you look at Bowen with the goals he's got. Fiorentina aren't going to be an easy team to beat. They're an established side in Serie A. They're in the Coppa Italia final this year. They're in this Coppa final for a reason. West Ham might need to nick a goal or two at times, and Bowen is the kind of guy who has shown how clinical he can be in the last few years. He could be the guy to win it for us.
Absolutely. Nubaid, let me come to you. In terms of those players that Connor was talking about there, the sort of battle up against them from this Fiorentina side, let's sort of work our way through them because I think that they are the perfect three in terms of the players that you think are going to change the game or win the game for West Ham in what is going to be a really difficult game because Fiorentina are a good side who like to have possession, are good when it comes to creating chances as well. And the sort of clash of styles is quite interesting here because I think West Ham kind of hear or we'll see and do their work on Fiorentina and kind of quite like their style of play because they are very, very offensive. There's a high press there, but it allows West Ham maybe to hurt them on the counter-attack. In terms of those key players and matchups, let's start with Declan Rice. Bonaventura, would you say that he is the person that they will sort of come to battle in this one?
I mean, Fiorentina tend to make chances via their midfielders arriving late into the penalty area and also in those half spaces, which is sort of where you'd go, well, Declan Rice will occupy those spaces. But like you said, they're a heavy possession-based side. They'll want to keep the ball. They play a really high defensive line. And so West Ham will have the option to hit those diagonals or hit the balls over the top, which is where Antonio probably comes in. So I actually think, like, man for man, this is sort of a game where West Ham will be able to go and let's sit deep in our shape, probably as they want to do that. That is going back to Moyes' actual format of playing and say to Fiorentina, can you come and break us down? Now, Vincenzo Italiano is a genius of a coach. He always finds solutions. So that's where I'd go yes, you've got Rice against Bonaventura, but if he starts following him around the park, Bonaventura will just go, just come follow me then. Because they have other options, whereas for West Ham, it's slightly different. Rice is your main man. He's the guy you want in possession. He's also the guy you want out of possession in the right areas. So either way, I think it'll be a fascinating battle between them two, but on a whole, the game's probably going to get won in that sort of area.
Yeah, huge night for Declan Rice because, I mean, let's be honest, it's going to be his last game for West Ham. It does feel like he will be moving on and he will be wanting to sort of get himself a goal and, exert his will on the game. I think that's a really interesting point in terms of the two because, yes, defensively, he's very impressive, but what you're saying really is you want him to be proactive and kind of take the game to him, drive with the ball, which has been so brilliant. 3.58 progressive carries this year. He's so complete as a midfielder. 2.3 tackles and interceptions as well in the Conference League this year. We spoke about Paquetá, kind of put him forward. Amrabat up against him.
Yeah.
That's going to be another key battle, isn't it?
Definitely, and we obviously saw the exploits of Amrabat during the World Cup. He's a man that we watched closely. He's one of the best players at the World Cup. Close to moving to Barcelona in January, and he's up against Paquetá, who Connor can probably elaborate on this a little bit more, has been a man who's come into his own at the back end of this season. He's a West Ham fan favourite, and he's the man who's going to make stuff happen. I know Nubaid said that Declan Rice is the man that they want on the ball. We don't want to see Declan Rice going to go and try and grab the game. You want to see a performance from West Ham similar to the Alkmaar game where they are compact, they are solid because Fiorentina can hurt you and are a team that like to dominate possession. So I think it's based on West Ham being solid with the two midfielders of Souček and Rice and Paquetá really creating things a bit further forward. And he's a man who's got incredible talent. Again, a man who's shone on the World Cup stage. And that's where West Ham's success is going to come from. But you're right to mention it being a swan song for Declan Rice and almost a swan song for this generation of West Ham in terms of Rice, maybe Moyes, Mikel Antonio as well. Yep. The spinal core of this West Ham team have been hugely successful over the last maybe 3 or 4 years. A team that have competed in the upper echelons of the Premier League, top 6, even had challenging for the top 4 in previous seasons. So this is a game that's going to be based on emotion because there is a lot of emotion in it. There's going to be a lot of West Ham fans there as well. But West Ham are going to have to keep it compact and keep it tight and try and hit Fiorentina on the counter-attack to really make sure that they're not hurt by the dangerous players of Fiorentina. Because like you said, Bonaventura is a player that can hurt West Ham. And if Declan Rice is going to be following him around the park, that will leave space for Fiorentina's other players to really damage them. So going into this one, you want to see West Ham do what West Ham do well and try and negate the things that Fiorentina do well.
I want to watch a good football match. I don't think it's going to be.
Do you not? You think it's going to be tight?
I think West Ham will try and play on the counter, and I think Fiorentina will play the game they always do. I think West Ham might be all right actually having a go. It's a final. You've got Declan Rice's final game, potentially David Moyes'. We're going to talk about Jared Bowen as well. Yeah. There's a few characters in there where you go, it's your final games. Like, you want to go and play your game, surely.
Yeah, I don't. When I think West Ham, I don't think being fluid is maybe the best.
Not quite fluid, but I don't want to see them sit back.
You want to be proactive.
Yeah, a little bit more proactive. Yeah.
I think it's difficult to do though. It's a difficult thing to do, especially with so much on the line. It's going to be. They're trying to win their first trophy since 1980. This is West Ham are a huge side, but they don't know how much this means. And there's an element of obviously trying to win that first trophy for such a long time. Also an element of qualifying for Europe next year as well. So it's going to be a lot of pressure, and I struggle to see how West Ham will come out and play fluidly with so much on the line.
Especially against a team that likes to have the ball for the bulk of the game. I think it's going to be painful, West Ham fans. Baraji against Bowen, we're talking about on that side, left-hand side, right-hand side for Bowen. That's a key matchup as well. Very complete left-back, Baraji. That's going to be an interesting one. See, again, is Bowen following him or is he following Bowen? Connor, let me come back to you and ask you about this idea that Kweku was talking about in terms of that sort of end of a chapter with this West Ham side. I think a lot of players, even Bowen, you could imagine maybe someone trying to come in and chance their arm in terms of buying him this year. But Rice, Antonio, as Kweku said. But what about the main man, David Moyes? David Moyes, do you think this is his last game as the manager of West Ham, regardless of what happens? Because some would say that his time is done and that this tournament, although very important to the fans, kind of papers over the cracks over what happened with quite heavy investment with quality players in the Premier League this year. What do you think?
Yeah, so I think that's one of the main storylines for this game, actually, is that is David Moyes at the end of his chapter at West Ham? If he wins this title, he'll be the most successful West Ham manager in half a century. No one can doubt that. He's taken this club to a European final, a European semi-final last year. He's had the West Ham attempting to qualify for the Champions League a couple of years ago. This doesn't happen to West Ham usually. But then you look at, if he does win this final, what else is there left for him to achieve? Does he take West Ham to the Europa League final next year? If he did, he'd have to do that without Rice. By his own admission, he said Rice is likely going to leave. And also, it comes down to whether West Ham want to keep him. There's reports recently that West Ham could sack him if he loses his final. And if he wins, he'd be unsackable. But that doesn't strike you as a club that is desperate for a man to stay and this long-term vision. So, where does he see his future? He's got a year left in his contract. He'd have to do it without his best player next year, rebuild this team. Do they pick a style that is like his, where they sort of give him back in charge of transfers and they, play this counter-attacking style that he likes? Or do they try and play fluid again with Lucas Paquetá, who can do that? But then you look at someone like Souček, who's more of a David Moyes player. So, where does this team go? I think there's a lot is up in the air after this final.
Okay, interesting stuff, guys. Get in the comments and let us know how do you feel about David Moyes? Should he be the manager next season? Regardless, there's a Celtic job knocking about, which I'm sure he probably would love. Prediction time, guys. Connor, we'll finish off with you. So, Kweku, how's this one playing out?
I would love to see West Ham win. I know it's kind of sacrilege as a Chelsea fan, but just their journey and I think the completion of a chapter under David Moyes and seeing Declan Rice lift a trophy in his last game as a West Ham player would be great to see. I just think that Fiorentina are going to have a bit too much for West Ham, unfortunately. It's a game I can see going to extra time and I actually see Fiorentina winning 2-1 in extra time.
Okay. Nubaid?
I can't see anything other than a Fiorentina win. I'm sorry, Connor. You've gone all the way to Prague, but you're going to come home disappointed, I think.
Brutal.
I think I've watched enough of Fiorentina to be quite convinced that they're too much of a complete side, and West Ham are going to be hoping for certain things to go in their direction. And although we're sat here and we're saying the narrative's on West Ham's side, I'm sure there's a lot of Italian fans going, the narrative's on Fiorentina's side as well. So I'm going to go extra time as well, but I think Fiorentina end up winning 4-1 in extra time.
Oof! Oh, so right, they're just dead on their feet, West Ham.
Legs are going to be gone.
Really? Wow, interesting.
I love that.
I hate to say it as well. My gut says Fiorentina, and somehow quite comfortably. I think that clash of styles, will suit Fiorentina overall. They're in great form as well. Yeah, it just feels a bit like Frankfurt last year for me. I think that's what's kind of in my mind. Connor, can you give us some optimism for all West Ham fans? What's your prediction?
West Ham haven't had a great year so far. Not all times playing well, but maybe this could be the night they do it. I think extra time is a fair shout from all of you. Maybe it's 2-1 to West Ham in extra time. Who can you back more than sort of Paquetá and Rice and Bowen? They've been in European games for more than enough now. Maybe they're the ones to do it. 2-1.
He's gone 2-1. Okay, guys, what do you think? Let us know your predictions in the comments down below.
Thanks so much for watching ESPN on YouTube. And for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for premium content and live streaming, subscribe to ESPN Plus.